Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 69 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we're speaking with Courtney Moorehead Balaker, the writer-director of the excellent new film Little Pink House, about that Kelo Supreme Court decision. Yes, it's a message movie, but it's a good message, and it's important. This week's show is sponsored by I Feel Pretty, the new Amy Schumer film about loving your body, and it's one that we're not supposed to actually laugh at, according to the PC police. Before my conversation with Courtney, I wanted to take our sponsor a little more seriously. A new editorial at Deadline.com, one of the major sites that covers Hollywood, by the site's executive editor, no less, asks a very odd question. Are we supposed to laugh at I Feel Pretty? Are we allowed to? The new comedy star Schumer is a normal-sized woman who all of a sudden thinks she's supermodel thin. There's some laughs there, I think, on the basic concept, but it's ultimately about loving yourself as you are, not as you want to be. At least that's according to the early buzz. And of course, Amy Schumer is very woke, and so you know that's going to be somewhat of the message, if not the entire message of the film. The op-ed in question also touches on that Molly Ringwald essay, where she blasts the John Hughes films that made her a star in the first place back in the 80s. Turns out they're problematic in 2018. But here's the editorial sucker punch. Released today, The Hangover would have to answer for all that drunken white privilege. All right. The Hangover came out in 2009. That means it's 9 years old, and already it's problematic, dated, maybe even a little racist. Do you see where this is all headed? This is disastrous for comedy, let alone the culture at large. You know, at what point does an Amy Schumer type, or maybe even Amy herself, now would be a nice time, put her foot down and say, hey, enough. It's a comedy. Laugh or don't laugh. X-raying every joke is killing humor. We're not there yet, but I suspect we're close.
Don't touch that dial. You're listening to my daddy's podcast.
Here's the celebrity tweet of the week. This week's winner is Andy Richter, the sidekick to TBS's low-rated Conan O'Brien and his talk show. Richter is a hardcore liberal whose warm and fuzzy persona isn't exactly what you see on Twitter. You get a very different side of Andy Richter on social media. Case in point, this particular tweet. And I'm not talking about your white man boy dorm room Ayn Rand fantasy philosophy. I mean in real-world terms. How can you say that the GOP has anything to offer average struggling people besides nostalgia? Their policies are just destructive, unless you're already loaded. I guess he hasn't been looking at any of the economic indicators the last 6 months, or how many companies have given back quite a bit to their employees after Trump's tax reform passed. But, you know, listen, not everyone has access to the news like the rich and famous, so maybe we should kind of steer Andy towards a Google News site quick.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
My hit tip of the week is nails. You know, I'm a big fan of actress Shauna Macdonald for one simple reason. She kicked butt in that great horror movie The Descent and the sequel, which isn't so bad. I've recommended both recently on this show. Here, she's a very fit mom. She's got a kid and a husband, but an accident leaves her paralyzed. And things get even worse for her when she's recovering. In her hospital room each night, something creeps into her area, her space, gets pretty darn close to her. What is it, and what is its connection to the hospital in question? Now, Nails is not a great horror film, but having our protagonist bedridden for much of the movie felt pretty fresh to me, with some apologies to Stephen King's Misery. There's some really creepy sequences here, the minimal special effects work, and McDonald is a good enough actress to make her character really kind of click, despite being in bed for most of the movie. Nails is available now on Netflix, and it's exactly why I like streaming services. It's a low-expectation movie you've never heard of before, but it kind of packs a punch. It's why streaming video services are so much fun, and so worthwhile. Now let's get to my chat with Courtney Moorehead Balaker. Courtney's the driving force behind the new film Little Pink House, opening April 20th. The great Catherine Keener stars as Suzette Kilo. You may know the name. She was that working mom who found her dream home and wouldn't let go, but now who would take anyone's dream home? Well, in this case, the government. It's based on the Kelo Supreme Court decision that made eminent domain part of our vocabulary, part of the conversation, and also a not-so-friendly term that a lot of people dislike across the political spectrum. Little Pink House is the kind of smart, thought-provoking film we need more of these days. I really hope you go out there, check it out, see it, support it, and tell a friend. It needs that kind of support. It deserves that kind of support. Here's my conversation about Little Pink House and much more with Courtney Moorehead Balaker. Courtney, thank you for joining the show. You know, every independent movie, there's a big story behind the making of it. It's always a struggle. It's never easy. But from your perspective, how was Little Pink House? Was it a similar struggle? Was it epic? And was there a moment where it all kind of slid together into place?
Yeah, as you said, any small independent film without the support of a studio is a challenge because you don't have as many resources and you're kind of out there on your own sort of rogue. But we were very lucky. I've produced feature films. I've worked for studios before, so I brought in one of my mentors and incredibly established and experienced producer, Joel Swasan. He joined our team, and we put together just a really great group of people with a lot of experience. And after that happened, things really did fall into place. I think that part of why we were able to make it work is anyone who worked on the film was very passionate about it, whether it was the cast or the crew. They were very passionate about the story. They'd not heard of the story. They couldn't believe something like this could actually happen. We shot the film mostly in Vancouver, Canada, and at the time, we were known as the Little Movie because I think they were finishing Star Trek there. There was just so much. It was very busy. And we were like the little guy. And I found out that because we got really amazing local cast. Obviously, Catherine Keener and Jean Triplehorn are the stars in the film, but most of the rest of the cast was local. And we got incredible actors that, usually don't do small roles. And we found out that we were known as the good movie. People just really liked that, responded to the story, and everyone wanted to work with Catherine Keener and Jean Triplehorn, of course. So I just felt very fortunate that people felt the passion and the drive to make the film a reality.
Now, message movies can be kind of tricky at times. If they come together well, they change hearts and minds. If they don't, they just feel forced. They feel like that you're getting a lecture. And obviously your film is not that. But I'm kind of curious, from a creativity point of view, you're the writer-director. How do you steer away from the trouble spots, sort of the danger zones of that formula? Because it can happen. I mean, I think the best of intentions sometimes lead to movies that could be mediocre. But was that on your mind during the production?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I adapted the screenplay from a book of the same title, Little Pink House, written by Jeff Benedict. Wonderfully written book. I encourage anyone who's interested in doing a deep dive into the story to read it. It was always on my mind. I cannot stand watching movies that beat you over the head with message and ideology. For me, it wasn't so much a message movie. It was, my intention with the film was, there's this concept called eminent domain abuse. And if you explain it to somebody, they kind of get it, or maybe they don't really know where they land on it. But if you put a human face to it, it's a completely different story. And I wanted to bring the viewers into this woman, Suzette Kilo's experience. I didn't want to make a documentary. We could have done that. But there's something way more immersive when you dramatize something like this. I wanted people to come into her life and see how this whole ordeal that took 10 years of her life, by the way, turned it upside down. It took time. It took its toll mentally, financially, physically. And so for me, it was the human side of the story that had to be told, where the facts and the message needed to be in the backdrop. And I think that that's the only way that you can really communicate messaging in films. I think you have to solely focus on the human element of the story.
You've said in an op-ed that the goal of the film and its impact campaign is to finish the job Suzette started. Now, I was kind of curious from your perspective, having worked in film for a while now, how either powerful a single film can be, and is that power, do you think it's getting more pronounced in 2018, or do you think that that with all the distractions in our culture that a movie doesn't have sort of the sway that it once did?
It's hard. I mean, like you said, it's a busy time. Because films are easier to make in terms of money. You don't need as much money as you used to, say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There's a lot more out there. There's a lot more content. There's a lot more competition. And so I think it is hard to get someone's attention to focus on your film or to move the needle, as they say. To answer your question, I do. I absolutely think that film is one of the best ways to have an impact politically, socially, because it's an immersive experience. A lot of people covered the Kelo case when it was happening. Almost every major media outlet covered it, from People magazine to LA Times. So people would read about it. But I really feel like it's a completely different experience when someone sits in a theater and for an hour and a half goes through what these people went through. It's immersive. So I'm hopeful that, we have a shot at making a change. I mean, I'll tell you a quick anecdote, if that's all right.
Yeah,
we played at the Provincetown International Film Festival last summer, and great festival, by the way. And about a week prior to our screening date, I got an email from a guy named Mike, and he said, I saw that your film Little Pink House is going to be playing at the festival here. My family and I own a bike shop here in Provincetown, and the city wants to kick us off the property so that they can turn it into a parking lot. Can you help us? Mm-hmm. And I investigated a little bit, and I sent his email to the Institute for Justice. They're the law firm who took Suzette Kelo's case to the United States Supreme Court and defended her in her neighborhood. And they gave him some great pointers. And so he and his family came to the screenings, and they handed out flyers outside of the theater as people were leaving the film and the Q&As. And it was just serendipitous. The city council vote was like 3 days after our screening date at the festival. We won the HBO Audience Choice Award. Every screening was packed. And Monday came around, and Mike and his family won. They got to keep their property. And he credits the film. He really felt like people in the community that watched the film and went on that experience had their minds changed. And so, it's little things like that. Like, that's a small, tiny story, but he felt like the film really made an impact, and that's one of the reasons that we made it for situations like that.
Yeah, that's actually better than an Oscar in a sense, because that was the goal of the movie, not so much to win
exactly
awards, but to change those kind of situations. I was kind of curious about the media. You mentioned the media was obviously significantly covering the Kelo situation. I know you're sort of mid publicity cycle right now for your film, but are you having difficulties getting press for the film? Are reporters and critics and people coming to you? Are you reaching out to them? What's the status of that at this point?
We're doing pretty well. We have a publicist, obviously, that's reaching out, and we will be reviewed, and we have some opportunities for television appearances and things like that. I think that what the benefit is that because so many people covered the actual case, we can hopefully go back to those publications and say, hey, that case that you covered, we just made a movie about it starring Catherine Keener. So there's a little bit more of an advantage and hook. But I'm hopeful that we'll continue to get some good attention. David Crosby, Crosby, Stills and Nash, he wrote an original song for our film. He and I did the Adam Carolla podcast, which was a lot of fun. So he's been very supportive and helping us publicize it. Catherine and Jean have been very supportive of the film. So I'm hopeful that we'll continue to get some attention.
Now, discussed over the Kelo decision was rather bipartisan, which you don't see too much in our culture these days. How is that impacting the film's rollout, or even whether you can reach more people because of that fact?
It is one of those rare cases that a lot of people agreed with, no matter what side of the aisle they were on. Most Democrats thought it was a horrible decision. Most Republicans thought it was a horrible decision. So it's funny. I think that we have a rare opportunity to play to, vastly different audiences in terms of ideology, but because I've seen liberals respond very passionately to the film, I've seen conservatives respond very passionately to it, and that's great. That's a great thing to see. I mean, about 85% of Americans, when the decision came out, thought it was horrible and were shocked. What I'm finding now, we did the festival run last year. We've been reviewed by a few people, and we got really favorable reviews. But what I'm finding is that most people agree, no matter where you're coming from, that this type of thing should not happen again.
Yeah, and the film itself, by the way, not only is it good, but I loved a lot of the little touches in the movie that made it feel, I don't know if homespun is the right word, but just real and raw. There's the way that Kilo's character fixes a leaky faucet. There's one scene where she's getting dressed and she's pulling a stray thread out of her suit jacket. I thought all those little moments were the kind of things that you don't often see in movies, and it made it stand out for me. So,
thank you.
I appreciate those touches.
So.
Well, we're talking with Courtney Moorehead Balaker. She's the award-winning filmmaker and the driving force behind the new movie Little Pink House, about that Kelo Supreme Court decision. Let's talk about Catherine Keener. She's a great actress. We know that. This is you working with her one-on-one to make this movie. What was it about her approach that either surprised you or that made you really appreciative that she was the lead actress here?
Oh, yeah. Well, she read the script and we had a conversation. I'd never worked with her before, and she was, I couldn't see anyone else in the role. I've been a fan of hers for years, and I knew that if she took this on, she would just do a beautiful job with it. But she read the script and we had a phone conversation. We talked for about an hour, and she just responded to this idea of your home and the importance of when you find your home, your spot, how you put your roots there. And the idea of somebody uprooting you from that special place was just so traumatic. It really mattered to her. She got it. She completely understood it. And she was just, very blown away by Suzette and her, and the stance she took and her fortitude. And so we saw eye to eye on what the focus should be of the film and of the depiction of Suzette. And she also really responded to Suzette Kelo was not looking to be in the limelight. She wasn't looking for attention. She didn't like it. She wasn't, a crusader. She just wanted to live the rest of her life in peace. She raised 5 sons. They were all out of the house, and she had a pretty tumultuous life and upbringing, and she just wanted quiet and peace. And then that was one of the driving forces of her to buy this home and renovate it with her bare hands. And then she does so, and then she's about to enter the biggest battle of her life. And Catherine really wanted to honor this sense of humility and how she was not looking for the attention. And she loved that about Suzette. I think she did a really beautiful job of capturing that too, just sort of a slight stoicism, but humility that is supported by tremendous strength. And I thought she depicted that really beautifully in the film.
Yeah, there's something about a home where you feel at home it's irreplaceable. So that's obviously a key part of the story.
Yes.
You produced the really good documentary, Can We Take a Joke?, about political correctness and humor and what's happening on colleges. And I know it's only a couple of years old, but I feel like our culture and the landscape is changing so rapidly. Have you considered maybe a follow-up project, and where do you think that conversation has gone since you made the film?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we are considering a follow-up project. We're trying to decide if it's a TV series where we, on a weekly basis, take the biggest outrage and break it down with comedians, or if it's a podcast. But we need the conversation to continue because, as you said, I mean, it just seems like things have gotten a little out of control on the college campus. I will say, and I'll just kind of focus on how what our film did. There were a lot of campuses that showed the film. I think it screened on like 200 campuses, and we were really pleased to see how it led to conversation. There were a few incidents where people like boycotted or somebody like pulled a fire alarm to shut one of the screenings down, and there are a few instances like that, but mostly, you had like the college Democrats and the college Republicans, or like the, libertarian groups all getting together, and they had a conversation about the film. And that's all we hoped for. We just wanted people to talk about, censorship and what it means and why it's bad. And especially in an art form like comedy. So we were pretty hopeful that, it wasn't just shouting matches and, people, protesting the film and things like that. It was mostly productive conversation. So I'm hopeful that can continue, and that films like ours and other projects out there will continue to, create spaces where people can be open-minded.
One of the things I've been surprised at and really saddened by about Hollywood, and I review films, I cover Hollywood. It's what I do. It's what I do 24/7. And I've been really amazed by the lack of collective outrage from the Hollywood community toward free speech attacks, toward what's going on in college campuses. I mean, there are exceptions. The Adam Carollas, Bill Maher comes to mind as well. But just collectively, when you think about how politically active Hollywood is, and it's their right to be politically active and embrace the causes they embrace, they have not embraced this cause, and certainly not en masse. Why do you think that is? I mean, you're a filmmaker. You work with fellow creative souls. I just can't imagine why they would not be on the forefront of this discussion.
Some of them are, some of them aren't. I think that the ones who aren't, and I look, I've never had a deep conversation with any Hollywood celebrity about this concept of censorship and free speech, but I do know what you're talking about, and I think Hollywood is a weird town, and it's very tribal, and it's very cliquey, and I think that some people are maybe nervous about stepping outside the popular opinion of their peers. I am not like that. I've never really felt like I fit into Hollywood. And that's why my husband and I started our own company. I mean, there are parts of the industry that I think are very bold and brave and do very provocative things. But I don't know. I think overall there are a lot of people that are nervous about doing something that could be offensive. Because look at what happened to Kathy Griffith. And I'm not saying that I support what she what her choice was artistically, but I mean, everybody got on this bandwagon. That's disgusting. That's horrible. And then she was basically like blacklisted for about a year. And it's almost like if you didn't hop on that train, there was something wrong with you. Mm-hmm. I think that the backlash against Kathy was a bit surprising, just given, the fact that other comedians have, been pretty critical of presidents in the past. But anyway, my point is that it almost felt like if you didn't get on that bandwagon to banish Kathy, you were a bad person. And then it died down, and now she's fine, and she's selling out shows and things like that. So I don't know. I think it can just sort of be groupthink, if that makes sense. I think people just kind of maybe they're a little nervous about saying something different and provocative that could possibly be viewed as unpopular, and that's dangerous. I think people need to say what they think and be transparent in their opinions. And I think people need to be open to that. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it, but I don't want to live in a society where I'm constantly terrified that my career is going to be crushed because I say something that my peers don't agree with. That's so immature. I mean, it's just, I have a 3.5-year-old in preschool, and I'm like terrified, like of just school. Like what's going to happen when he's in kindergarten or first grade or whatever. And, just, if this sort of groupthink mentality. And I don't want to raise a child who is afraid to say what he thinks or be unpopular. And I won't raise a child like that. But it just feels childish to me. Sorry, that was a really long answer to your question.
well, hopefully the pendulum may swing back where maybe when he's 8 or 9 or 10, things will be getting the way they
I hope so. Yeah. Or I'm just going to take him out. I mean, we'll just take him out of school. It's really important to us that we don't raise a snowflake. We want to raise someone who's strong and independent and messes up and it gets criticized and can take it, and it's so dangerous to think about these kids in college that they're going to be released into a world, and their moms and dads are talking to their employers about how they didn't get a good, performance review. And that's happening. Yeah, that type of thing happens. And it's doing more damage than good. These young people need to leave college and enter a really hard, difficult world. And if you don't have the skill set to do it, you just won't survive. And I think that people that are raising kids like that are doing way more harm than good.
Mm-hmm. Your film is at its core a message film, although it's obviously much more than that. And often when Hollywood makes a message movie, the message is from left of center philosophies. And I know that your film has a bipartisan appeal to it based on the nature of the Kelo decision. But I was kind of curious, why aren't we seeing more right of center or even conservative message movies in Hollywood? Are there sort of structures in place that makes it less possible? Are the artists just not submitting their work to the, they're not sort of creating those stories? From your perspective, what's happening in the industry?
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, message movies and what to avoid. And most of the conservative films or the conservative message films that I've seen are just so heavy-handed. And I don't know. You're right. Hollywood is mostly a liberal town, and I think getting movies made with liberal messages in Hollywood is easier than getting movies with conservative messages. And I don't consider myself a conservative filmmaker. I have seen conservative product, and a lot of it I just feel takes the message first route. Yep. People don't want to be told that their worldview is incorrect, especially if they're over the age of 30. I mean, it's not only condescending, it's very disorienting to people. People don't want to be told they're wrong or that their opinion is not based in reality, or it just doesn't work. And I think that if people are making a film with this sort of heavy-handed message, trying to convince somebody to think a different way, it's not effective. And I think that there was this film. It was a French-Canadian film called The Barbarian Invasions, and beautiful film. I think it was made like 15 or 20 years ago. It's in French, and it was about the healthcare system in Canada. And I don't know I have no idea what the politics of the filmmakers were, but it was basically a very critical film about national healthcare, Canadian national healthcare. Mm-hmm. Basically, the hero was a son who basically was very wealthy and secretly paid for everything under the table so that his dying father could be comfortable, and took him out of the system. And it's a beautiful film. And anyway, I don't consider that a conservative film, and I don't know what the intention of the filmmakers were, but I thought if anyone wanted to make a film that is critical of socialized healthcare, this is a brilliant film, because it was about a son and a father.
Yeah, first and foremost.
And it was about it was about the relationship. It was about this father who believed in the system. He was a socialist. He believed in socialized healthcare. He was adamant. And then he had this son who was more of a capitalist, who was very wealthy, who didn't believe in it. And then they had that was their background, but it was not about the politics or the difference in politics. It was about their relationship, and it was about a dying father and a son trying to make his father's last days comfortable and meaningful, and surrounding him with love. And it was just a beautiful film. But you walked away really thinking, does that system work? Mm-hmm. So I think again, it goes back to, you have to make it about, you have to make it about the human being and the people involved, not the ideas.
Well, before we let you go, Courtney, you mentioned your production company. Is there anything coming down the pipeline? You mentioned a possible Can We Take a Joke sequel or follow-up of some kind. What other projects are you sort of either flirting with, working on? Maybe they're nearing production. What can you share?
So we're working on getting Can We Take a Joke set up as a TV series. We have a few other feature film ideas in the pipeline, not so much ready to shoot, but we are completely focused on the launch of Little Pink House, not only the theatrical release, but just the impact campaign that will be associated with it, trying to bring an end to eminent domain abuse. And we encourage anyone who is interested in seeing this movie to go see it in theaters. We're the little guy. We are up against really big guys, and it's so important for people to support the film in a movie theater, because if we can show strong numbers in the movie theaters, that will only help us grow. And if it's okay, I'd love to just share our website where people can go, littlepinkhousemovie.com. You just click on Watch Little Pink House, and you will see every city that we're playing in. We're playing about 27 cities. And if you don't see your city there, you can bring it to your town through TUG, and we explain how to do that. And we have that going on, too, for places from Anchorage, Alaska, to Lexington, Kentucky. People are bringing the movie to their town. So we're very focused on making an impact, getting this film and just Suzette Kilo's story out into the world.
Well, you have my support, and I'll have all that information on the show notes page at HollywoodInToto.com. Do check it out. It is important. And see it that first weekend, and that's really sending a message, and then you'll get more small but good movies like Little Pink House in theaters, and that's what we want, because the Avengers are great, and I'll be first in line when that movie comes out, but you need movies like this as well. So they are equally as important. But well, thanks again, Courtney, for joining the HitCast. Please see Courtney's new movie, Little Pink House, opening April 20th, and go to that TUG website if you want to check it out. Even if it's not in a theater near you, you can make it happen, bring some friends, and we really appreciate it and look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks so much, Christian. I really appreciate the support.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodInToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodInToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.